Right.
I can see you all for the first time. There we go.
Very good. And of course, Councillor Castro, you voted yes to move us into open? Yep, I'll take that as yes.
I did. I had my hand up. I don't know if you can see me. I'm still here waving at you.
Ken, thank you very much.
Right.
So to the actual recommendation for 7.1, do I have a mover? Councillor Tozer, and a seconder, Councillor Bowden Lumsden. Very good. All those in favour? So moved. That's all the formal items today, councillors, but we do have one GBI I'm aware of and possibly a second one. So, Rebecca, do we have the first GBI ready to come up?
If I could just speak to that, Mark.
I was going to defer to you, Councillor Gates. Councillor Gates, did you have an idea for the title of the GBI, since it's...
Just, I guess, debris collection
Director Heaton?
as a result of flooding.
Works for me. Yes, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Just hearing debris collection from flooding. With the big storms we had in December, I asked for a similar thing in Parkwood through the heavily vegetated bush space, and I got told we couldn't do anything like this if it wasn't part of the whole of city bulk collection.
It probably wasn't a major event, Councillor, such as this one has been. This one, in many instances, has surpassed the 2011 flood level. So, quite possibly, it was not of the magnitude of what we're dealing with right now. It's up to Councillor. This is just a general business item.
So I'm happy to, we've got some words there, and I'm happy to move that if I have a seconder.
Given that there's likely to be more effects and indeed flooding effects over the next couple of days, perhaps we could say, and any other affected area.
Well, no.
Happy with that?
Could I just speak to this?
Yeah.
This has come about today as a result of some conversations at the Disaster Management Unit meeting this morning. It was suggested that residents have the opportunity to apply for one of the blue flexi skips, and that remains an option for people that don't have major inundation at the moment. There's 112 properties right across the city that have had major inundations, and they're in the Alberton area and the Tallebudgera Valley area. Council cannot support a whole of city additional collection process, nor can it say in this that we will focus on other areas. This is very specific to where items have arrived on people's property, mostly on the river system, where it's floated down the river, it's landed on their property, it's not been damaged goods at their house or their own goods and belongings. It's been trees and bits and pieces that have floated down the river that are difficult for them to be rid of. So it's very specific. There still remains the opportunity for people to apply for the blue flexi skips, and there's been an upgraded commitment to the delivery and collection of those flexi skips. So in the main, they should serve the needs of most people, but in areas like Alberton, a few that Councillor Hamill has advised at Luscombe, and in the Tallebudgera Valley, it was felt this morning, and the CEO may do something quite separately from this because he was in attendance as well at the meeting, but just in order to document something after a conversation with the director here, we felt it worthwhile to pop something up as a general business item so that we can get things moving between the Director of Water and the Director of City Infrastructure to perhaps do a run-through of the most impacted areas and ensure that those collections happen in a timely manner.
Councillor Bowden Lumsden, a question?
Yes, Chair. Just two parts. One was, I guess, what's the criteria for inundation? Is it every house in Luscombe, Alberton and Tallebudgera Valley would be eligible for this, or?
Director?
Certainly not.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that emergency services personnel have visited those areas and have identified the properties that have been inundated and flood affected. So it would only be to those particular properties that have been identified as such.
So the mover might like to add where indicated by the SES or whatever to the motion, just to make that clear if Councillor Baildon Lumsden felt the need that. I'm not on this committee, so I can't move anything.
I'd put that to you. I remember the committee. Do you feel the need for those words, Councillor Baildon Lumsden, or are you happy that...
I just wanted clarity on what it meant, and then also what it is in practice. So what will happen
in practice?
So if it's passed, supported, vehicles go and remove all the debris.
Yep. Director, do you want to give a bit more detail to that too?
Through you, Mr. Chair, essentially that's it. Special vehicles will be and have been organised. TNI have a number of grab trucks, and we've been able to source a rear loading vehicle from our normal waste collector, who will be dispatched to these areas where they are suited the best for whatever materials they have to pick up. But that'll be coordinated by the supervisor or the manager on the ground.
Yeah. Councillor Tozer?
So where inundation has occurred on suburb boundaries, how will we, is it? I suppose what I'd hope to think is that in Tallebudgera Valley, which I drive to most days because my kids go to school there, the boundary between Tallebudgera Valley and whatever the next suburb is can be quite close. I don't know the extent of, I haven't had a chance to drive through all the streets, but I'd hate to think that someone who's actually in a really difficult situation where they have been inundated, but it's just outside Tallebudgera Valley, doesn't get excluded from this service.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that won't occur. I mean, I think the terminology of the Tallebudgera Valley areas rather than suburb or whatever
it's not meant
correct.
to be. Yeah, it's not meant to be strictly that suburb. It's meant to be. We're going to respond to need as is required in those general regions.
Those affected areas,
I
say, is identified by the
as long as that's
emergency services.
Yeah, as long as that's what's intended, that's great.
Yeah.
By the disaster management.
Yeah,
unit.
we can tag that on to the end.
Sorry, Chris, do you have some correct words?
Through the Chair, the way these properties have been identified is through damage assessment, which is coordinated through the Local Disaster Coordination Centre. They're being performed by the likes of SES, the Fire and Rescue. So they are sending to the LDCC, and then that list of properties is then acted upon and issued. So perhaps the wording could be as identified by the damage assessments by the Local Disaster Coordination Centre.
Thanks, Chris.
Only there. So I just I think Councillor Gates has spoken to it well enough of what is up on the screen, but just to say that as the representative for Alberton and Luscombe, appreciate that while we probably didn't need the words to get this done, I think it was the right thing to do. I have properties in Alberton that still today have got 10 foot of water sitting across them. So while a lot of they're all 2-story homes, and it's expected that flood waters could go through the bottom story on times. This has well and truly exceeded 2017 levels for most of them. Some of the properties are approaching 1974 levels. Fences, sheds, livestock, just the amount of stuff coming down and the amount of debris that's come down the river and continues to come down the river is extraordinary. So I know it will be very well welcomed by those areas. The 4 houses down in Luscombe that I finally got to visit yesterday because Luscombe Bridge had opened up. The Albert River looks like a lunar landscape along there. Every tree and through there's just been ripped out to topsoil. 2-story houses out there have had water go through the top story by a foot or two, which I'm confident beats 74 flood levels through there as well. Luckily, there's only 4 houses affected out there, and I'm sure residents down in Tallebudgera Valley will be very thankful for the assistance as well, which I know from the coordination centre now being set up at Ormo, that residents in Albert and Luscombe have welcomed seeing so many city staff and representatives from our partner groups hitting the ground today to make those assessments and start the work on that recovery stage and that relief stage. Councillors, is everyone happy with those words? I'm still happy to move that as is. Is there everyone's happy with that now? Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Tozer. All those in favour? Councillor Kasha, so that's carried unanimous. So I had a second proposed GBI, which I haven't given you, Rebecca, but it's only a one sentence one. And this is in regards to meeting start times of WWE committees. And it's just that future meetings of the WWE committee be moved to a 1 p.m. start time. Question, Councillor Gates?
Just whether you've checked with the chair.
Well, I'm chairing today.
Yeah, well, that's not appropriate if you haven't had a conversation, because we have had that conversation previously and the chair preferred it to be at 2 o'clock.
That was with Williams' committee?
No, that was for water. Because when we did the schedule of meetings, we altered the start times of various committees. City infrastructure moved into the afternoon because it's often a smaller agenda than community services, lifestyle and community. So we swapped those over. And at the time when I was assisting with the preparation of the meeting schedule, I went to all of the committee chairs involved to find out what their preference was, and Councillor O'Neill's preference was for a 2 o'clock start. So she may reconsider, but why don't you leave it till she's back?
I'm happy to do that, and maybe committee members could reach out to Councillor O'Neill in the meantime and give their opinion, because I really don't see the point of waiting around a few hours in between meetings if it can be earlier. So I'm happy to drop that one for today.
Typically planning might go
So-
longer than an hour.
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge. So I think previously governance followed planning, and planning would often bump into the governance schedule. So I think it was quite deliberate in terms of the movement of the committees. Like I appreciate
that, but it's been 6 months since we've had that happen now.
Well,
Like there hasn't been a planning committee go to that length for quite some time. Anyway,
well,
we can leave it.
at least for the last 2 months when we haven't met. So I think the reality is that it was done for a reason. But I can understand that it is frustrating when the planning committee ends early and we have to head back to our divisional offices to get stuff done, and then you come back in, and clearly the further away you are, the more of a drama that is. But
And I don't know what time planning finished today, but since I left at 10:15, I've been to Ashmore, to Upper Coomera and back again in time for the 2 o'clock start. If it had been at 1 o'clock, I could not have done that. So
It's a fair point. Anyway, we can leave it to next round and maybe thrash it out with Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Young, see you later. And I had a question on notice that if the director could come back to me or come back to the committee before full council, or even before next committee round would be fine. But can I get an explanation of why in the current Staple and Jacobs Well water mains project, we are tunnelling underneath Alberton Road instead of just opening it up and putting the water main in?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll check that out. But normally we don't get a choice. The roads, if that's a state-controlled road, they stipulate, and even our TNI stipulate whether we can actually open the road or we have to.
So Alberton isn't a state-controlled road unless we are possibly in the part of it that comes off the section that is, which that might be the answer. But I'd love to know a reason, because we could have easily diverted around that road, opened it up and had it done in a few days. Instead, we've spent a few weeks preparing for a drill rig to go underneath for a ridiculous little stretch. So if I could get some more detail on that one.
Look, totally agree. We get frustrated. We love to open roads. We don't get the chance that often, but I'll follow up and confirm.
Councillors, any other general business or questions from the floor? Very good. Meeting shut at 3:12.